The Manhattan Project was the code name given to the top secret development of atomic weapons during World War II. Following the successful test at Alamogordo, New Mexico, under the direction of Dr. Robert J. Oppenheimer, plans were set to change history and end the war. After 6 years of fighting and 60 million people killed globally, the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, ended the last chapter of World War II. But how did the first bomb get delivered? What horrific event occurred as a result? How did the USS Indianapolis play such an important role and become infamous in history? And how did this event become a legal first in U.S. naval history and a major travesty of justice?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps scout sniper, history professor, historian and book author, and we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
The bomb was to be delivered to the island of Tinian in the Marianas Islands by the heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis. Lieutenant General Curtis E. LeMay was awaiting the delivery. His best and most trusted pilot, Colonel Paul Tibbets, would be the man to drop the first atomic bomb in the B-29 Enola Gay. The Indianapolis was damaged by a kamikaze fighter which impacted off the island of Okinawa, but it was soon repaired and returned to active service. On July 15th, Vice Admiral William Purnell summoned the Indy skipper, Captain Charles B. McVeigh III, and informed him of his mission. However, neither McVeigh nor anyone aboard were informed as to the contents of the shipment. The cargo would be accompanied by 2 Army officers and kept under armed guard at all times. Before sailing, McVeigh inquired about the tactical situation. He was assured that there was no enemy surface or submarine activity in the area along his route. McVeigh was briefed. "Things are very quiet," Commodore James Carter, commander of the Pacific Fleet's Advanced Headquarters, told him. "The Japanese are on their last legs, and there's nothing to worry about." The Indianapolis didn't have sonar and was denied destroyer escorts. The orders were explicit. The Indianapolis was to maintain strict radio silence, no communication. The Indianapolis traveled from San Francisco to Tinian in only 10 days. The Indy arrived at Tinian on July 26th. Once they offloaded the top secret shipment, Captain McVeigh stopped at Guam. Then, on July 28th, McVeigh and his crew continued on from Guam to Leyte in the Philippines. Following another briefing, the Indianapolis departed Guam for Leyte with McVeigh confident that he was not sailing through an active war zone. He had been assured of this. However, there had been a submarine detected several days prior by an American ship, but it lost contact. This information was not given to McVeigh. Meanwhile, Japanese Imperial Navy Lieutenant Commander Mochichiro Hashimoto, commanding the submarine I-58, had been the submarine detected. He was carrying a full load of torpedoes and 2 Kai-10s. These were manned human torpedoes, which were driven into enemy ships, basically underwater kamikazes. McVeigh was given total discretion on his scheme of maneuver. This meant that he could sail straight ahead or run a zigzag pattern to disrupt any submarine torpedo attacks, but they were still under strict radio silence orders. On July 30th, 1945, McVeigh and Hashimoto both had a fateful encounter when I-58 spotted the ship. The following is from Hashimoto's statement as to the event. "We had the full moon behind us, and the enemy ship was now clearly visible. She had 2 turrets aft and a large tower mast. I took her to be an Idaho-class battleship. The crew were all agog, awaiting the order to fire the torpedoes. There was dead silence, quiet. The favorable moment for firing was approaching. At last, in a loud voice, I gave the order to stand by. Fire. The torpedo release switch pressed at intervals of 2 seconds, and then the report came from the torpedo room. All tubes fired and correct. 6 torpedoes were speeding fan-wise toward the ship, bringing the boat on to a course parallel with the enemy. We waited anxiously. Every minute seemed an age. Then on the starboard side of the enemy by the forward turret, and then the turret. Afterward, there rose columns of water, to be followed immediately by flashes of bright red flame. Then another column of water rose from alongside the number 2 turret and seemed to envelop the whole ship. A hit, I shouted, as each torpedo struck home, and the crew danced for joy. The ship had traveled about halfway to Leyte when it was hit by 2 of the 6 torpedoes. The Indianapolis sank, in about 12 minutes, killing several men outright. About 300 men went down with the ship, including Chief Warrant Officer Leonard Woods. As the bow plunged and Indy listed to starboard 10-20, then 45 degrees, Woods ordered his men to abandon the radio shack. But Woods himself did not move. Instead, he stood fast, trying to send an SOS even as Indy headed for the bottom. Of the nearly 1,195 men on board, as many as 900 survived the sinking. They were stranded in shark-infested waters with no supplies aside from life jackets and a few life rafts. Captain Charles B. McVeigh III was among the survivors. What the surviving crew did not know was that the SOS transmission, the only reason to violate the radio silence order, never went through. The explosions had destroyed the radio relay system and power generator. The men suffered from lack of water and dehydration, delirium from saltwater ingestion, and then there were the sharks. For 4 days and 5 nights, the men endured the terror of hundreds of sharks, congregating in a feeding frenzy. Men were pulled under the water, never to be seen again. Others had limbs bitten off and they bled out. Because of communications errors and other problems, the ship was not reported missing when it failed to arrive in Leyte Gulf as scheduled on July 31st. Basically, the Navy never knew the ship was missing. 4 days later, help unexpectedly arrived. The survivors were discovered by accident on August 2nd when they were spotted by a passing US Naval aircraft. The pilot radioed the report of many men in the water, which alerted a Catalina PBY flying boat that in turn alerted a nearby destroyer, the USS Cecil Doyle. Both the PBY and destroyer worked rescuing sailors throughout the night. By that time, only 316 of the men remained alive to be rescued. The U.S. government delayed reporting the tragedy until August 15, 1945, the same day it announced that Japan had agreed to surrender. But then another injustice was about to unfold. The situation was a major embarrassment for the Navy. Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Ernest J. King, ordered that McVeigh be court-martialed and convicted to the dismay of Admiral Nimitz and others. No American officer in history had been court-martialed for losing a ship in wartime. McVeigh's charges were primarily hazarding his ship and failing to zigzag or take evasive action to protect his ship and crew. The prosecution never mentioned that McVeigh's orders gave him full discretion on how he maneuvered his ship and the fact that he was not given an accurate threat assessment. In fact, McVeigh had been lied to. This was perhaps because the Navy wanted to avoid revealing that the Japanese Navy's latest secret code had been broken. The U.S. government brought Hashimoto to the Washington Naval Yard as a government witness for the prosecution on December 13th. It was the first time that an officer of a nation at war with the United States had testified against an officer of the U.S. Navy in a court-martial. Hashimoto testified that the visibility was good on the night of the attack, and he had been able to easily spot the Indianapolis. Hashimoto gave 50 minutes of testimony focused on whether or not Indianapolis was zigzagging, and he noted the ship did not deviate from its course. In February 1946, McVeigh was found guilty of negligence for having failed to steer the ship on a zigzag course to help evade enemy submarines. The military court recommended clemency, and the sentence of a decrease in seniority was set aside. Upon his retirement in 1949, McVeigh was promoted to Rear Admiral. Many survivors of the tragedy believe that McVeigh had been scapegoated by the U.S. Navy. They contended that the captain had been ordered to zigzag only at his discretion, and that poor visibility before the attack made that inadvisable. Hashimoto said, quote, "I could not believe that an American captain could be held responsible for losing his ship. Not even in Japan would that have occurred. It was war. I felt very bad for him, for he was a very nice man." Charles McVeigh III lived on, racked with guilt over the loss of so many of his men. Finally, in 1968, he took a rifle and sat under a tree and committed suicide. Following a campaign to clear McVeigh's name in 2000, the U.S. Congress passed a joint resolution exonerating him. In 2001, the U.S. Navy placed in McVeigh's record a memorandum noting that the resolution had absolved him from blame. On December 7, 1990, Hashimoto met with a group of USS Indianapolis survivors in a meeting at Pearl Harbor on the 49th anniversary of the attack. Hashimoto told Giles McCoy, one of the survivors, "I came here to pray with you for your shipmates whose deaths I caused." To which McCoy, apprehensive about encountering the man who had caused him so much pain and sorrow, but touched by Hashimoto's comment, replied, "I forgive you."
We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History. Please click like and subscribe for free. And please stay tuned and be engaged and informed. Send us comments if you have questions or even show ideas, and we will respond to all requests and comments as soon as we can. Thank you.